Monday, October 25th, 2021. To order, our first item of business is a joint meeting with the Lakewoods Promise Advisory Board. And I think we're going to promote some people to the panel here. The attendees list. So greetings. I see staff member Brian Humphreys and Dr. Loveday. I would like to have you introduce yourselves, or maybe the chair of the committee can take that over before we talk about the work plan. So
thank you. And I believe Ellie is still joining, and she is our chair.
You see her name's up, but her mic's off.
Right.
There you go.
Am I in there now?
Yes,
we can hear you.
Okay, but I don't see me.
Right, we don't see you either.
So why is that?
Press your
start camera.
Yeah.
Health technology.
I am not a
upper right-hand corner with your cursor, there'll be three dots, should be three dots, and then a drop-down menu that'll have start video.
I'm on the upper right-hand corner and nothing is happening.
Well, that's the limit of my technical knowledge, so I'm sorry.
So Ellie, at the bottom left, is there a place that says start video?
No, there isn't. At the bottom right, I've got a square with my imprint in there, but no photo.
Okay.
Oh, that's the square you need to be inside of with your cursor. Then it's in the corner of it. You get three dots.
Well, I've got a plus, a minus, and a circle, and my name.
No. Can't help
Okay,
you. So, but we can hear you fine. There you are.
There you are.
Oh.
Okay.
It's a miracle.
Let there be light.
Yes, no kidding. Okay, good evening, Mayor Anderson and Deputy Mayor Whalen and the rest of the council members that are here tonight. My name is Ellie Wilson, and I am the current chairperson of the Lakewoods Promise Advisory Board this year. So I believe that Brian Humphreys is with us also as our Promise Coordinator, and I'm not sure how many members are here with me, but I did see Joyce and Carrie and a few others. So our goal tonight is kind of to review what we have done and to give you an update on our activities this past year. As you know, our vision has always been that we all are interested in working with every child in Lakewood and every youth in Lakewood, and we want them to have the best of opportunities to reach their full potential. And our mission has always been on focusing on our community resources so that we can improve the lives of our youth and their families and provide a fulfillment of the 5 promises that we always keep in focus. And when I say our 5 promises, I would be referring to improving the physical and emotional health of our youth. I would be talking about promoting safe places for their activities. I would be looking at collaboration of bringing caring adults on board in the role of mentors and tutors. I would be talking about collaborating with our Clover Park School District in providing equitable educational activities and community resources. And lastly, we would be encouraging and promoting services to others in our community and for others here. So we do want to continue serving our children and our youth as well as their families and the communities in which they live. And I believe you have been given a work plan. Is that correct? Do you have a sheet with our work plan on it?
I believe it's in the materials, yes.
Okay. Well, I'm just
Could
going
you
to
run through
I'm
those
ju-
for us?
I'm going to run through those. In January, we elected officers. We began planning workforce development and youth mental health initiatives. In March, we conducted youth mental health conversations with our youth council. In April, we developed a communication plan with our youth council reps to increase communication about our Lakewood youth. In May, we conducted first and second workforce development resource fairs. In June, we conducted the third workforce development fair. In September, we progressed with plans for our youth mental health initiatives with the Clover Park School District. And we also subcontracted the workforce development efforts and rebranded that as Lakewood Thrives. Then we had our first initial joint session with our new youth council, the first part of October, beginning our youth mental health strategic planning with them. Then we have currently our joint meeting with our city council. November, we'll be going through feedback from the city council. We'll be identifying strategic goals for 2022. And in December, we'll be reviewing the draft work plan for 2022 and begin our strategic initiatives for next year. So the current work plan really focused on three items, three particular issues that we wanted to put some work into. And these were the three issues that we were working on. We were working on youth mental accomplishments, health strategies. We were working on workforce development strategies, and we wanted to work on better communication within our community with our youth and for our youth. And in that regard, with our youth mental health strategies, we worked with the Clover Park School District and with our youth city council and came up with some ideas as to how we might do some productive communication with possibly professional health people from Greater Lakes Mental Health. And that's a topic that we would like to delve into further. We also discussed different areas of mental health and possible health professionals that could also work with our families as well as with our students. And our youth council itself, they would like to work on a summit with a focus on mental health issues. So they are planning to put an event together sometime in 2022 with that emphasis. Then in addition to that, our workforce development strategies, let's see if I've got my notes here. Our workforce development and strategies involve communicating with our higher education partners, Clover Park Technical School and Pierce College, and working with them to look for ways in which we could develop programs that were going to provide a living wage for our families with that we work with here in Lakewood. And we started with 3 workforce resource fairs in Springbrook. Well, actually, we had 2 in Springbrook and 1 in Telecoms. We had 3 altogether. And they seem to have been welcomed. And as we went from 1 to the 2nd to the 3rd, they became more popular and more prevalent, we brought in more people as a result of just having some news about them and actually having them take place in those areas. Now that we have communicated with those communities and we have pulled things together, we have now subcontracted that particular project to a career team that will take the lead on it and grow it. And the Promise Board will oversee that work by that particular team. And lastly, we want to continue with our communication initiative. We didn't do as much as we wanted to. This year, we didn't have the capacity to do the issues that we had talked about. So we are continuing that conversation with our youth council, and that definitely will be a priority in 2022. So with that, if there are any questions from our city council or any of our members, I'm opening it up to you all.
Questions from council?
Yeah.
Not seeing any hands going up. Is there any other member of the committee you'd like to add to Ellie's presentation?
I'll just say a couple words. I think Ellie did a really good job of summarizing the work in those three primary areas that we've been doing over the last year. And the one I'll comment on is the Workforce Development Initiative that has really gotten off the ground this year. We've had people from both Pierce College and Clover Park Technical College engaged with Brian and James Hughes and from Career Team. And we're really excited about the work that's occurring there under the title of Lakewood Thrives. And a real focus is trying to connect better within our community with the individuals who could really benefit from living wage jobs and help them see what the opportunities are and to work through any of the barriers and challenges that there might be that they're facing. And it's around the theory of people in the community that they know and trust being kind of that link to initiating some of the communications together. Our plans are to bring in employers, unions that as well, and students who graduated from some of these programs to talk about their experience and what they can expect and what the prospect is for them if they go in there. Our hope is to get them on our campuses too and get them in some hands-on opportunities, but to help break that barrier of never thinking about higher education and then to get into a place where they can make some choices and see some things in high wage jobs that will help give them a living wage.
You know, I kind of have a question on that with respect to the intake. What some of your methods or opportunities might be there. I'll give you one not directly related example, but in similar circumstance. When I was the chair of Goodwill, we had a construction training program, and so 4 days a week, 1 day's class, 4 days a week was hands-on kind of thing. But we're trying to find folks that was aimed at people who needed to finish their GED or get back into school, et cetera. And they came out and they got really good jobs. We had trouble. We found one of our best recruiting spots was barbershops. It was kind of random. Somebody knew somebody, and we got a line on how to communicate with a particular group that was qualified for the program and interested.
Yes.
So the lesson to me was you never know where your opportunities are going to be. What are some of the opportunities that you think you have to bring people into the pipeline?
Well, actually, I would say that's one of our biggest challenges is, we have education and we have community members who aren't thinking that direction and how to bridge that gap. And talking, I think right now we're looking at working in Springbrook Park and in Telecom in some of their community spaces and activities and hosting like, I can't even remember what we called them. Brian, you might remember that, but some sessions where we bring people together just to talk about different careers. And again, it's relying on people that they know in the community and people that they trust and not just outside people coming in to talk to them.
Mr. Brandstetter has a question.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, the members of the committee. Ellie, I appreciate your presentation, and Dr. Loveday, I appreciate the discussion about the workforce education piece. But I had a question looking forward into 2022. this past summer, the Warriors of Change program that took place at Clover Park High School resulted in some initiatives that students in that program thought that they would want to pursue, and some of them seem to align well with one or more of the promises. Some were directly aligned with the promise of giving back to the community and opportunities to do that. And others related to safe places and very specifically, they know where the safe place is, but it's a safe transportation to get to the place. One thing that's not clear to me is, the city partnered with Communities and Schools of Lakewood and the school district in terms to put that on, but it isn't clear how the city is going to keep track of how well those 7 groups of students are doing with their proposed initiatives that they wanted to propose, and even to the extent of are they going to need some help, support, resources? How are things going on? And I was wondering whether those projects were something of interest to this board and could be the place that would track them for the city and bring back to the council's attention if there was something we should do to help make some of those that are going to be more meaningful come to fruition.
I'd be happy to share a brief update. This is Carrie, the Executive Director with Communities and Schools of Lakewood, and a recent addition appointee to the Lakewood Promise Advisory Board. Our students have started meeting after school, the Warriors of Change students, during the school year. So they're continuing to work on their 6 proposals. Ironically, and maybe sadly, one of the barriers is transportation. So our school district, as you know, there's a bus driver shortage. Transportation is not guaranteed home for our high school students unless you're an athlete. And so I was at the bus shop today picking up bus passes for our students so they could make sure to attend after school programming and attend Warriors of Change so they can continue working on their proposals and have them come out. The Warriors of Change group were invited to the last youth council meeting and presented, and you're right, their proposals are very much in alignment with Lakewood's 5 promises, but also with the goals of youth council this year. So some of the projects that the young people in youth council, access to quality youth programming, voice and choice in youth programming, safe spaces, is so much alignment because they're all kids in our community, right? And so I think the Warriors of Change students will be partnering with youth council on some of those things this year, including the summit. But I would say, I wasn't planning on bringing transportation up, but it continues to be a barrier for our kids. I mean, really, it comes up in our conversations with students and families every day about how kids can get to the places they need to, how families can get to the places they need to, and with reliable transportation. So I'll plug that. That's not a direct, work plan goal for the Lakewood Advisory Promise Board, but it's definitely something our students need so they can access the programming in the safe places they need.
Well, I mean, that's a theme that we've heard over the years, and it's a question of are there things to do, or are there just not ways to get to the things that exist to be able to go and do that? But would you imagine that the youth council speaks to us monthly, that would be where we should expect to get some ongoing updates about Warriors of Change projects that are progressing I imagine some will progress more robustly than others, but interested in knowing and wouldn't want to any of them to languish solely because some support the city could provide we were just unaware of. But anyway, thank you, and that's all that I have, Mr. Mayor.
We're
Well,
all
thank you.
scheduled for an update on the Warriors of Change for December 6th, I believe, at the city council meeting.
Hey, Mr. Whalen.
Carry on the transportation issues. Is it typically an issue of the kids are in one location and need to be transported, say, from Clover Park or wherever they are home, or from home to Clover Park, or both?
Yeah, I mean, I think this summer it came up that they were just needing to get to the Boys and Girls Club. The school district doesn't provide transportation because it's, quote, within walking distance, but
Right.
you know, a 30 or 40-minute walk in the rain,
Right.
you know, kids are
From the high school to the Boys and Girls Club, so one location to the next location.
Yeah, and in that instance, now it's after school home. So if you need to stay home after school to get help from the teacher for an after school club or program, there's one bus and not guaranteed that you can get on the bus.
There was a time when we had a bus that would travel from school to school and pick up kids and take them to certain locations. There was a time when we did that. So
Out loud a little bit, whether that's something we might look at if we had some resources to cobble together to contract with Pierce Transit to help with a shuttle service, because I know that they've got some assets there that aren't fully utilized, but it's a driver issue, right? And part of the challenge, but something we can look into.
yes, we definitely can look into it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I don't know, we might also look into transportation with our own school buses. So, are there any other questions?
Ms. Dodsworth.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of follow-ups regarding, just as Ellie said in the past, you know, when we were doing our after-school program at Park Lodge, we received some resources from the community to provide, we paid the school district for bus transportation back. And so, you know, they're set up to pick up and deliver children in different ways. It's just a matter often of scheduling and resources, so and partnering. So that's something that we can continue to pursue. And then just to follow up with something that Councilmember Brandstetter said as well, and it segues right into one of the other really priorities of this year, next year with our youth council, is communication. I did work with the Warriors of Change this summer, and I met with a couple of the different groups and helped them through the brainstorming of their ideas and connecting with resources. And I was really, really surprised at their lack of awareness of just what I would think would be really basic resources in our community of the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA and so many of the programs and services and partners. You know, we put that list together for council. We presented it several weeks ago, and it was very, very comprehensive. And we've since updated our website with that as well. But we have found just in programming and surveying is that we are constantly having to tell our story, that we can't just expect folks to understand or to know what's happening in the community, not just city resources, but community resources. And so that communication piece is going to be really, really important. And then working with folks like Carrie and the library that are working every day with teens and youth, how to communicate with them, how to share information, how to allow them to find out what's going on in a manner in which they are interested in doing that. You know, I probably would not be able to share with them or create the communication program or plan that would work for them. So we are working with those younger folks and those agencies that work really directly with kids to help with that. And so there'll be some, I don't know, ad hoc committee, stakeholder groups, sessions to work with our youth council and work with our community resources to really remember that we have to constantly tell our story. and repeated over and over again, because there's so many people, you know, kind of from a transient perspective coming through our community. And we can't just expect that because we've done it great once or twice, or that we're constantly talking from an adult perspective, that those kids are in the loop regarding what those resources are. So again, that's a big piece of where we're going next year.
Ms. Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to remind us all, because as a liaison to the Promise Board, a lot of the students that we put the information out there, they don't have the technology to get to it unless they're in the school. So once they leave the school, if they don't have a chance to do it at school, once they leave school, they don't have that option. So there's another challenge that keeps them from getting the information, because the information is there, but how can we get it to the students when they are not, they don't have the technology to do it after they leave school?
That would be my follow-up question. Thank you, Mary, on that. Both Marys. The issue is, have we surveyed in some sort of realistic, comprehensive manner how students prefer to be communicated with? Because it seems to me almost every teenager has some sort of cell phone. I may be delusional about that, but many of us, you know, have the ability to log into either Pierce County or now even Lakewood to receive information by text. And I know, you know, speaking from my dad's perspective with my 3 kids, I can't talk to them on the phone, but I can text them. And they'll receive a text from me, as opposed to they don't want to talk to dad on the phone. But if there's some way we can do a better job of availing themselves, most of these kids have cell phones, of the ability to have a program that feeds information to those to whom they've requested to receive it via text message, kind of like the opt-in program at the county and elsewhere. That might be something that we should look at and perhaps fund if it needs some resources to get up and running, because that would be a method that certainly teenagers, and I'm familiar with, are most comfortable receiving information with or through.
That sounds like a great idea to, you know, pursue.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else from the committee? Council?
Survey.
Oh, you weren't coming through, Jason.
Well, you know, in the work plan, I mean, to the extent you can kind of weave in maybe a communication survey utilizing your youth council and maybe some of the other youth, and see if they can help put something together from their perspective on how they would prefer to be communicated with. Maybe articulate what barriers they believe as youthful members of our community that we need to help them overcome, and see what resources we can bring to bear to make it happen.
Right. We'll absolutely be working with them directly, because, as I said, it doesn't make sense for our board to be deciding those things. It's really got to come from the kids, because we can have all the amazing things happening and flyers and programs, but if it doesn't get to them in a meaningful way or shared, as you know, we can send a million texts or whatever out, but it takes those kids sharing it with their friends, and then they're going to get the information. So we'll figure out working with them directly, and it does take some really focused work to get to that point, and we'll keep you updated throughout the months as to how that's coming along.
We did have a conversation with the youth serving organizations over the summer and asked them this very question, and I remember it because I made some silly comments like, "What's the social media the young people are using?" And they said that's not even close. The only thing that works is face-to-face. The only thing. And then that's what I also asked the youth council in our first session, talking about what's your why for the year, and started this conversation of, well, how do we get communicate? And they said the same thing, face-to-face, only thing that's going to work, which is why they said Youth Summit, the thing we have to do if we can pull it off by the end of the year. So.
Yeah, I remember I was a little surprised our youth during the summer said we should have a Boys and Girls Club representative come in and meet with us in the school and tell us what's going on at the Boys and Girls Club so we know. Have you ever gotten a spam text message, right? Like you just don't read it. A message that's generic, you don't read it, or you don't necessarily trust the information. I think our young people are the same as us. You trust, even social media, you trust that, which comes from people you know and have a relationship with. And so I do think, I mean, we text message kids and, and phone calls all the time, but it comes from someone, they recognize the number. They know who it is,
TikTok, Carrie, you got to do a TikTok video.
Are you on TikTok? Our kids are all over it. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Go to Mr. Bradstetter. I'm sure he's.
If the council wants to do a TikTok, I'll help you put one together.
Mr. Bradstetter.
I would say that from my years in the college system of where I was trying to do the same type of recruitment that the mayor referred to very early on in the session, that one of the things is that the best sort of thing, particularly for younger folks, 20 and younger, is that they don't react well to titles of programs. They can know that there's a program called something somewhere, but that doesn't, without the details and maybe the ability to ask some questions about it, they can't process it to the point of where it'll move them to take some action because they think that's maybe a program for me. And so we can publish lists of programs and where they are, but until we can somehow get some, and whether you have, someone to where someone actually can find out something about them and talk with someone who's been participating in that program, that's how you can recruit people and motivate them to actually make the decision to get involved. So it isn't an easy question. I'm glad to hear that young people thought somebody coming to our school and telling us about the program would help us decide whether we want to be involved with it. I don't know how you word that to put that onto your work plan to look at next year. It's all too easy in this day and age to say that social media is the answer to communicating, that just doesn't work for everybody in multiple generations.
So true, so true. But I think that we can have a very good discussion with our youth council in the next few months. And I think that we can help them and support them in their passion for having an event sometime in 2022. We did this 2 years ago. It went very well. And it was such a disappointment that we couldn't do that again the following year. And now we've had, to stay put. We've not had the luxury of just being out and about for so long. We are just anxious to be out there. And I think that a lot of issues that we just discussed this evening, we can have a really good conversation with our youth council. And I look forward to working with them in putting on an event next year.
Those are some good goals for the next year. See any additional hand raised? So I'd like to thank the committee and the committee members who aren't here. Take our thanks back. This is kind of a wide-ranging group that does a lot of different things in the community, but I think it's a good place to come together and collaborate. So thank you for all you do, and we look forward to your progress.
Well,
Thank
we
you for
look
meeting
forward
with
to
us.
working with you as well. We are very appreciative of your support, always.
Thank you. And now the next item of note on the agenda is a review of the purchase and sale documents regarding the Warts Lake Park expansion. And for this, we have Ms. Dodsworth. I would note that I drove by Springbrook Park not too long ago, and now that everything's opened up and trash is cleaned out. It's kind of a marvel to how much larger that is than the postage stamp we started with. So.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, because of your support, council support for our many park projects, little by little, it takes, this grant here and this program there, and then we get to a point where we have an amazing space that we can really either work with or enjoy. So this is another step forward in expanding space. I'm going to share my screen and just kind of walk through a little bit. I know you're all pretty familiar with this area, but I think it will, let's get here from the beginning. Can you see my full screen, or do I need to change the display setting?
Mary, if you can change your setting, please.
Is that working?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
So just as a quick review, Warts Lake Park expansion, this is a project that we've been working on since cityhood, really. And just Warts Lake Park is located in the northeast area of Lakewood. It's a very densely populated area, and there is very limited space. So you can see it here circled. And then if you look on our map, this is a map of all our city parks. It's really the only open space that we have east of Bridgeport and Lakewood Drive. So it really is providing great support to a lot of folks that don't have access to other areas. You can see there's really big boundaries to them going to other locations like South Tacoma Way and the freeway, creeks, etc. And of course, this is quite close to our international district as well. So just as a note, that's the area there. This is the current park boundary. You can see that it has grown over the years. We started with, we used to have this little, here it is. I want to get to where you can see my pointer, my little mouse here. Can you see it now? So, we've kind of slowly expanded this park site over the years where it's about 26 acres. And then we're looking at expanding it to, catch up. Let's see. Sorry about that. There we go. So this is your project expansion area. It really goes in line with the fencing and the topography behind the Lakewood Cinema Plaza area. And so when complete, purchasing all this area, the park site will be about 36 acres in size. This little piece right here, down here in the corner, the city purchased early in 2020, might have been end of 2020. And this was just a single parcel. It was owned, it was empty parcel owned by one person. And so it was quite a simple purchase compared to how this purchase is a bit more complicated. And actually it was a bit more complicated than we initially expected, but we're working through all of the different pieces to make it happen. So I'm just showing you this. As you can see, this is the area that we're looking at purchasing. And it's bits and pieces of several parcels and really kind of odd shaped parcels. And so there's been a lot of extra work that's had to be done regarding surveying, assessments, legal descriptions, separation of descriptions, title reports, modified title reports, appraisals, appraisal review. So it's kind of been a very complicated process, but as I said, we're getting down to the final purchase and sale and getting everybody on the same page. And then following, right prior to that, we'll be doing a boundary line adjustment. So again, all of these red hashed parcels will become part of Warts Lake Park. And then just to show, again, these are little bits and pieces of the parcel. So we've been working with the property owners, and since the beginning, they've been open to selling the property. They have agreed with the purchase price, which is total $55,000, which is a pretty good price for 10.5 acres. And it's just been getting through the process of all of the bits and pieces that needed to be done in order to get everything in line and in order so that we could get the purchase and then the boundary line adjustment. So That is all I had for slides. And so I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. In the packet, we provided, let's just stop sharing, I guess. In the packet, we provided the purchase and sale agreement and some maps. And what I'll also provide, I didn't include, but will provide in the agenda bill where we ask for your permission to allow the city manager, authorize him to execute the purchase and sale agreement and all of the things that need to be done in order to purchase a property. The things that weren't included in the packet that we will include are the forms, the conservation featured stewardship agreements and the declaration of restricted covenants. And all that means is that we will keep this area in open space into perpetuity, which again, the city council has seen that on other conservation futures purchases, as well as when we purchase something from RCO, Recreation and Conservation Office. That's also something that they require that you sign when you utilize those resources to purchase open space. You have to keep it that way forever. Just kind of nice for this particular area that it'll stay a nice open space for that neighborhood area. And then this will also allow us to implement the Warts Lake Master Plan, which we have quite a few grants, and we're ready to move. We're moving forward with doing those projects, phase 1. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Dodsworth? Mr. Whalen?
I know in the report, environmental hazards and nuisance.
You're breaking up.
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yes.
So Mary, on the environmental side, we know this is a stormwater retention pond effectively. Do we have any concerns that we assume any sort of liability from all the stormwater runoff flowing from the asphalt and oil and all that sort of stuff from vehicles, or not?
No, well, we're already the owner of a good portion of that and manage a good portion of that. So we're not going to get any more or less from from what we currently have. We will be doing a lot of wetland delineation, environmental work in preparation of the master plan, especially working with the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So that that information will be coming. We have worked also in preparing for the grant applications. We did work with Tacoma Water, Pierce County Water, Stormwater, and City of Lakewood worked with them. And so we've been working on their planning, and we're part of their team. So they're aware of this project and their ideas for future access needs, et cetera. We want it to align with our trail program and things like that. So we're all on the same page with that.
Safety and security, you know, we all know that there have been some challenges with knucklehead activity out there. What's the sort of business plan that's going to help address that now that we're expanding it by roughly a third, right?
Right. So what we're working on right now, and we'll be continuing when we start really implementing the development of the master plan, is the first thing we're doing is we're going in there and we're limbing things up and clearing out sort of the underbrush areas so that there's not so many hiding places, so to speak. And we started that down. I don't know if you've been there, but if you recall, many years ago, there was sort of a church being used down in the off of 84th. You went down that steep hill and there was like a little house down there and there was a church going and doing something. So that's all been removed. And we've just gone in there and opened that area up a lot. And we got really good feedback from the police department saying we need to do that throughout the park. And that's our plan. We do have we've contracted with Conservation Corps that'll be here for a month during the month of March. And they're going to be coming in and doing like 3 weeks of gut work in there just to keep things opened up and again, eliminate some of those hiding areas. And then once we can make it feel safer and look safer, you know, our police department's pretty stretched right now. They're very responsive when we ask them to get in there and help us. But if we can get positive people in there doing positive things, that does reduce some of the knuckleheads that are doing things. Anytime you're near a freeway and an industrial area like that in a heavily populated area, you do see a lot of that transit activity. It's primarily transient moving through. And if we can keep on it like we have been, the city's done a really good job of, once we see our eyes on something, we get in there and provide resources to help folks make better choices, and then clean areas up. So that has been a real constant struggle for us in that area. So that's our plan, is to clean it up, open it up, and make it easier to use and safer.
All right.
Before we go on, I have a follow-up on the environmental issue. I just ignorant on this. Do we have a discharge permit for this? Are we responsible for the discharge of water now out of Wards Lake? And to what extent is there potential indemnity from DOT? Because it's really their stormwater retention pond for the freeway, is my understanding.
You know, I don't have that information, but we'll find that out for you. I'll include that. I know that there's, you know, our stormwater division would be in Public Works Engineering. They manage the permits and those kind of activities. So I'll check with them and find out more about that regarding the permit and any liability regarding that.
And DOT's responsibilities, retained responsibilities.
Yeah.
It's mostly their water. Mr. Bulkey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Mary, could you just, and I don't want to deviate too much from the evening, but how did we originally come into possession with Wards Lake? I know we've had at least one other purchase, and you mentioned that. How did we end up with it anyway?
Well, right after cityhood, the city, we utilized CDBG funds to go in there. There had been some houses back there, and I think there's been some naughty activities occurring, mostly off of the entrance, and there were private properties back there. So the city purchased several properties. I think there was some crime that happened back there that was pretty significant, and so they purchased the land and took the houses down. And then we have slowly over the years purchased a parcel at a time or two parcels at a time. It's really been since just after incorporation that the city has done that with RCO funds, CDBG funds, some general funds, donations. It's really been an ongoing project. And so this really is probably going to be the finale for this piece, because it really does tie all the ends up with the significant borders. But yeah, it's been a work since the beginning. And so I think it was initially back in just after incorporation when there was some negative activity that happened in those houses. They were empty houses. So it was one of those, you know, empty houses in a big wooded area. There wasn't a lot of goodness happening back there. So
Do you find that now that we bought those other, is there a trailhead from the south? I'm looking at the map. I mean, if I'm on 25th Avenue South or any of those other 25th Avenue Court, are there trails that I can use, and are people using them on a very regular basis?
yeah, I'm pulling my screen up again. And
I'm looking at the topographical map of the purchase, but then
yeah, I'm just going to run through here really quick if I can, and I'll kind of get to where I can give you a little bit more information. So that one. Yeah, so let's see. Are you looking at the full screen right now of the map?
Yep.
Can you see my pointer? Can you see my mouse? Because that'll be
No.
Okay, I can do that now. Okay, I think you should be able to see it now. Okay, so this is 25th Avenue coming in. And let me look at this down here. So this is our 25th Avenue coming in. There isn't a real trailhead here, but there's a gate right here. So you can get in. This is a caretaker house here. So there is access here, and people do come in the park this way. This is the area that used to have the church down there. Can you see my pointer? I just want to make sure that you're.
I can't, no.
Okay.
I can't either.
Okay, so let me get here again.
Reduce it to one screen.
Oh, there.
Oh,
I
I'm
see a
sorry.
little
Sorry, you're probably looking at the wrong one again. Okay.
I do see this thing now. Yeah, it's moving all over the place. Yeah,
Now,
there you
there
go.
we go.
There you go.
There you go. Can you see it?
There you go.
Yes.
Okay, so this is 25th Avenue, and there's a caretaker's house here. So there is a gate here, and people from this part of the community come in this way. This is the old area that used to have the house, and it was a church kind of down there. So there's a gate here, but pedestrian access down here. And there's actually a little dock here that goes, this green is all actually water. And this is the area that's been cleared up a whole bunch. And there's a trailhead here and a trailhead here. And there's loop trails throughout here that were created by some Eagle Scouts many, many years ago. So we have a real loop trail in there. And then this, of course, is the main access into the park. There's also a little access here by the apartment complexes, but there's fencing all the way down here so that people aren't accessing from the side. So there's many different ways to get into the park right now.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Mr. Brandstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Mr. Osworth, thanks, very good. And I think that, the acquisition of these properties that will allow for the park to completely surround the water or the wetlands opens up a lot of now possibilities to move from acquiring land to now executing a master plan to make this a more robust recreational area for this section of Lakewood. And so I appreciate that. Given that we've redesigned, created new parcels, I guess, in the whole system, do you envision which cycle do you envision needing to make amendments to the comprehensive plan to or the zoning maps to rezone this into open space? And is it going to be all one category of open space, or are different parts of the park going to be open space 1 and others open space 2 based on what the plan calls for being there?
Yes, probably the next round, which I think they do that once a year, they make updates to the comprehensive plan regarding zoning. So we'll be a part of that next time when they come around. We missed the window this time. What our other plan to do is to take all these parcels and turn it into one big open space parcel, so we don't have all of these segregated little parcels, to make it easier just for planning and use. And it'll all be the same open space. All of the open space 1, I believe, all of the elements that we're including are eligible in that designation.
Okay, and then I had one other question that is off the lake, but what's the origin of the wards in Wards Lake Park?
It used to be called something else. And right now I'm a little bit stunned. So I'm going to have to get that back. I'll get back to you on that.
All right, thank you. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? And can you unshare the screen? There we go. Seeing nothing further, thank you much. I don't think there's any real disagreement over the advisability of moving forward and completing this transaction and making something out of it's a puddle.
Yeah.
So it's great to turn it into something useful. When you say it's going to be restricted forever, it's restricted from development based on the character of the property that we're acquiring, but so it's not taking too much away. So now we'll move on to a review of the third quarter police report with Chief Zorro. Thank you, Mary.
Good evening, Mayor Anderson, council members. Let me get going here. Okay. This is the third quarter report. It's kind of our usual array of crime stats and also a few slides at the end to talk about a little bit about the environment that our officers are working in right now, at least in the past couple of quarters. Before I get started, I just want to make sure my display is accurate. Mayor Anderson, can you tell me if you're seeing the full screen?
Yes. One
Okay.
screen.
Thank you. So calls for service, a little bit up in the third quarter. Felony arrests are holding steady, and misdemeanor arrests actually with a significant drop from the second quarter. And of course, our districts delineated there by color. And then here's our chart with the percent changes and just the total number changes. Some of the ones to look at, simple assaults and aggravated assaults, both up from the second quarter. We did have 2 homicides in the third quarter, and robberies are something that are up significantly also as we look at property crimes. And property crimes here are listed as a person's crimes, or excuse me, robbery is listed as a property crime, but it's probably the most serious of the property crimes because it actually involves the taking of something by force or with the use of a weapon. So definitely not a good trend in seeing increases in those, especially after years of decreases in, especially in robberies. Now, that said, we are still, when we look historically at the third quarter, through the third quarter, going back to 2016, you can see we're still on a general downward trend with our crime stats. So while we are seeing a recent increase in a couple areas, overall, historically, we are still going in the right direction. We just need to work more on those couple areas to make Lakewood even safer. Again, our total crime by quarter increase in the third quarter significantly from the second quarter of this year, based both on persons and property crimes, and you'll see both those here in a minute. I usually say that our crime stats are driven more by property crime numbers than persons crimes, and that's certainly the case. But as you see here, we do see a sharp increase in persons crimes from the second to third quarter, as the same as we do property crimes. So, but again, driven by just a couple categories in each, or a couple crimes in each category, aggravated assaults and simple assaults in the persons crimes, and then motor vehicle theft and robberies in the property crimes. And then society crimes, again, down significantly. We've seen that drop from the fourth quarter of last year, and not really a surprise given the Blake decision and the change in state legislation regarding drug crimes. Another factor playing into this is our ability to staff our special ops unit, which focuses on vice and society crimes. I'll talk a little bit more about that here towards the end. And collisions are something else that are on the rise a little bit in the from the second to third quarter. Still a good general downward trend going back to 2018, which is good. But we are seeing a lot of speeders on the road. And just listening to the radio, I could have told you this was going to be the kind of the outcome statistically, just because I'm hearing our officers go to more and more of them and seeing more and more of them on the road myself. And nothing has really changed with motor vehicle thefts, as I've reported for, I guess, about a year now. The COVID has a lot to do with these numbers because just a couple car thieves, when they're out and with no consequence, they are going to be stealing a lot. And something that's kind of new to this, though, is one of the hot vehicles right now are Ford trucks. Newer Ford trucks. Somebody figured out how to break into them and steal them, and the word spread. And we're seeing a lot of, fairly new Ford trucks being stolen. Then a couple of the significant incidents that we had, it's all about the aggravated assaults and the shootings. We've had, a couple tragedies and a couple of close calls that could have been tragic. One of those being a drive-by shooting where 19 rounds were fired, and one round went through and lodged in the headboard of a 3-year-old in their apartment, and actually got close enough to cause a burn on the 3-year-old. On July 30th, there was a gang shooting off of Steilacoom and John Dower. There is a pretty significant conflict going on right now between a couple of gang sets, and it's bad enough that they're shooting at each other, but these are 14, 15, 16-year-old kids that are involved in this. We've got a group of 10 or 12 that are responsible for this back and forth shooting and violence that's really just brazen and right now somewhat out of control. We have one homicide that's going to be a tough one to solve. It's kind of a cold one right now, in that there aren't really a whole lot more leads to follow up on, but a deceased person was found in a mobile home park, or in a mobile home at the Carwan Village. He'd been there for some time. It actually took a while to identify him. It was in one of the boarded up and condemned mobile homes, and he was found to have suffered a gunshot wound to the chest. All indications were that it was a homicide, and detectives are working it, but so far, no luck. We also had the homicide at the Stay Fresh Tattoo at 104th and Bridgeport. I think that was at like 4 PM, or definitely in broad daylight, where the deceased and his sister actually went to the store to confront somebody. A fight broke out, and the person that was working at the store shot the deceased, and then the deceased sister picked up the deceased gun and shot at the tattoo parlor employee. So definitely a chaotic scene right in the middle of Bridgeport, right in broad daylight. By all accounts, the homicide part was self-defense, and the sister of the deceased was booked for assault, first-degree assault. She actually hit another person, another employee of the tattoo parlor that was not involved in the initial conflict. There was an officer-involved shooting on September 5th, and this synopsis is from the press release that Tacoma put out. So there's no inside information here or anything else. Officers responded to multiple reports, and multiple jurisdictions responded to the Woodbrook neighborhood for a report of a male shooting off numerous rounds in an apartment complex parking lot. And this was at like 8 PM. So there was people out and about. After officers arrived, they advised on the air that they were being shot at, and then advised shortly thereafter that they were involved in a shooting. The Pierce County Force Investigation Team is investigating, with Tacoma taking the lead. Another shooting at the Wood Spring Estates Hotel on September 12th, where there was a male victim with a gunshot wound to his leg. It looked like the sale of a cell phone turned into an attempted robbery, and the robbery went bad, and then the gun came out and the victim was shot. One side note on the Wood Spring Estates Hotel, we were actually in the process of looking at an emergency suspension of their business license because of the high calls for service they'd had there pretty much since they opened in January. They're under new ownership. I met with their regional manager and their on-site manager. They recognize some of the issues, and they're experienced property managers, hotel property managers. And so we're going to monitor things, but I did walk away from my meeting with their regional manager with kind of a good sense that they know what they're doing and that they're going to turn things around there. And then finally, there was a drive-by shooting outside of a business in the 12800 block of Pack Highway, where the victim was shot and will end up being paralyzed for life. The suspect in that was identified pretty quickly. They knew each other. It was, long story short, I guess the shooter thought that the victim had informed on him in a drug investigation, which actually wasn't the case. But the shooter was apprehended just a couple of weeks ago in Tucson by the United States Marshals. And that case is actually being taken federally because the shooting suspect was already under investigation by the DEA for his involvement in drug distribution. What I want to move on to now is just a little bit about some of the individual trends we're seeing and just really the environment that our officers are working in. Some of it, I think we might be able to, we could say that it's attributed to the new legislation and some of the changes in laws, but we're monitoring more, and we'll monitor more as the months go by to see what the trends hold out. But we'll certainly, some of it kind of makes sense. But first, the number of shootings and reports of shots being fired. These are calls into dispatch. These don't automatically or always correlate with a shooting victim, but these are just calls into dispatch for somebody hearing shots fired, shots actually being fired, or somebody being hit. And as you can see, there's been a significant spike in the past quarter, or excuse me, the past month. That's going all the way back to January of 2019. This is, and not just in Lakewood, Tacoma, and countywide, and actually even statewide. I think gun crime is just through the roof. And this is one that I started tracking just with this quarter. These are traffic stops where the person being stopped just takes off. It's either, with the change in legislation, that we're more restricted as to when we can pursue a fleeing vehicle. And what we're seeing, what we were hearing and seeing anecdotally was that more and more, just from routine traffic stops, people were taking off. And that's, so we pulled some of the stats, and that certainly statistically proved out, at least in this last month. And that really, I don't think it's a coincidence that, the state legislators passed a new law restricting our ability to pursue, and suddenly this is happening. We've also had at least two occasions where people were in stolen cars and intentionally trying to bait our officers. One person was 15 years old in a stolen car and actually called 911 to say he was in a stolen car and about out of gas. And as officers got in the area, he took off, and that game went on a couple times with our officers not chasing, but him staying in the area trying to get our officers to chase, and ultimately was involved in a 3-car collision in Tacoma, not involving pursuits or anything else. But I think that is definitely a disturbing trend. And some of the restrictions that were placed on there, I went through our legislative changes a few months ago with you all. Some of the minor traffic offenses we weren't pursuing for anyways. But now I think the message has been sent and received far and wide that it's mandated, or it's the law that we can't pursue for a lot of things. So I don't think it's coincidence that this is the trend that we're seeing. The other thing that is disturbing, at least for me, and what our officers are working in, is an increase in assaults on officers. And if the pace keeps up, it will be a 60% increase this year from last year, going from 15 to 24. And the assaults include everything from being punched, kicked, spit on, and shot at, is what we saw with the incident down in Woodbrook. Last night, there was a call in the shift recap. This wasn't the third quarter, but in one attempt to take a felony assault suspect into custody, an officer was kicked in the groin, and that was his third time in 3 days having that happen to him. Assaults on officers are it's all just out of control. And I think has to do with some of the attitudes towards law enforcement. combined with just the beyond stressful environment that our country's in right now with COVID and civil unrest and just everything. People are just on edge and quick to violence, and it's resulting in an increase in assaults on our officers. Now, finally, with staffing is kind of been one of our front burner issues for a couple months now. We had 9 departures since June 30th. And I have to say that these numbers were as of last Tuesday when I submitted this PowerPoint. They've changed because since then I've had 2 people come and tell me that they are going to be leaving the department here in the next couple of weeks. So with 9 departures, that's almost 10% of our department in a couple months. 7 of those were retirements. 2 were officers moving out of state. Another 2 are going to be moving out of state to go be one to be an officer in Florida and one to go back to his previous profession, but doing it in Nebraska. And then the other thing that really has impacted our staffing is the number of people on some sort of extended leave, whether it's military leave, maternity leave, FMLA, or people out with significant injuries. You can see that's 8 people. That's you just can't take 8 people out of our away from our staffing when we're already have 9 departed and not have it impact what we do. And we've been able to hire some. We've been able to hire 5, and 3 of those are lateral, so we're able to get those folks out on the street a little quicker. But 2 are entry level, and they're going to be in the academy and not out for a year, or at least counting towards staffing for a year. And here's operationally where it's impacted us is we've had to move almost all of the staff from special ops to patrol, with the exception of the sergeant and 1 detective, and they are assigned to do nothing but background investigations on new applicants. And then all of our property crimes unit has been reassigned to patrol. And this, they're obviously the unit responsible for investigating property crimes. Now we're able to backfill that a little bit with some of the folks on the extended leave status. Those that we're going to afford them light duty and have them do some follow-up as much as the doctors will allow on some of the property crimes. So just it's going to take a while to recover from this. We've got probably even more departures over the next few months, and we're working hard to hire people. We're getting through it as quickly as the process as quickly as we can. But it's just not a quick process, no matter how quickly you go. So, and that is the last of the slides. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Chief Sorrow, Mr. Wayland.
I have a question on the staffing issues, Chief. So how many of our officers have special duty assignments like as SROs for the school districts or other types of assignments that perhaps could be pushed out to private security firms as opposed to uniformed officers?
Well, not many. I mean, some of them do like the off-duty work, which is essentially what SROs are for us. It's not it doesn't take away from their primary assignment because they're doing it outside of their normal work schedule. But one of the things to keep in mind too is if they're not there working at the schools to respond to the incidents that come up, the schools are still going to call. They're still going to need a police response. It's just going to have to come out of patrol instead of the SROs. There might be some occasion where private security can do that, but I don't know, especially in the schools, I don't know how well that would work.
Arthur, you learned about this
week. We can't hear you, Mr. Wayland.
2 departures you told us about this week that you learned about. So what are the reasons for those? Are they retirements or?
No, they're younger officers with about 5 years on, maybe a little less. They're both moving out of state, and it's one's getting out of law enforcement, the other one's staying in law enforcement, but going to do it in Florida. It is really a matter of them being very concerned about the political state in Washington and the attitudes towards law enforcement and the consequence for making a wrong decision or a decision that turns out negatively. And one of the officers came in and talked to me face to face and said it was a difficult decision, but his family was really concerned for him. So it's not just the officers themselves; it's their families that have the same concern.
In terms of recruitment, we discussed the fact that Tacoma is looking to hire 80, I think, right? And how are we competing with these larger agencies?
We're doing okay, I think. We are still getting people in the door. We actually just hired a Tacoma officer, and we have another one that just applied. So we do have some coming around, and we are all competing for the same people. And it's not just us in Tacoma. It's law enforcement across the state and up and down the I-5 corridor. Some of the agencies in East Pierce County are not experiencing the same thing. It's kind of interesting how it is an I-5 corridor kind of an issue, but we're doing okay. We're getting people apply, but we're getting a lower number of people apply and a lower percentage of people that are able to make it all the way through the process.
Last question from the recap I received from the city manager today and from your report. There seems to be a disturbing increase in either gun/gang related violence, typically in some of those areas of Lakewood where, frankly, those folks really can't take any more of that. What are you hearing out there from other jurisdictions? Similar issues?
It is. We saw what happened in Tacoma just last week, and that, it was the fourth quarter, but we had a homicide the next day here. And so within, that 36-hour period, Pierce County found a car with a deceased person burned up right outside of Lakewood. Tacoma had their quadruple homicide, and we had our shooting, a homicide. So it is all around us. Puyallups had some of it. It's just we're in a society where, everybody's at such an elevated stress level through, you increase somebody's stress level by taking away their sense of control and predictability for the future. And we've got that in spades right now for, when you look at what the pandemic has done. And then on top of that, increased mental illness, not being able to book people into jail, increased crimes, and then a liberal dose of guns. It's kind of it's not really surprising when you look at what we're living through right now. Even Pullman had a shooting homicide, a couple months ago, and they just don't have that. So it's not just us, and it's not just Tacoma.
Thank you for your work.
Ms. Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, when you were talking about the changes through our legislature, the laws that changed, have you had an opportunity to communicate with our legislators and letting them know how it has affected your organization totally?
Yes, particularly Representatives Levitt and Bernowski have been generous with their time and met with me last week, maybe 2 weeks ago now, and spoke with me for about a half an hour and allowed me to share some of that with them. So we'll see what happens. I'm hearing that there's more of that going on in other jurisdictions as well. So we'll see what happens in January or February when the next session starts up.
Yeah, I can understand what the officers are having to deal with when they're being abused and they can't fight back. That's That's not good. The other thing that you mentioned was speeding, and I have to tell you, that was an Audi that passed by me yesterday on going down 87th toward Phillips Road. It was doing at least 50 miles an hour. So this,
Yeah.
the speeding is bad.
It is, and we've got, our traffic unit is still there, but there's only 3 people in it. And that's, I haven't sent them back to patrol yet because they actually help alleviate some of the burden on patrol when the collisions come in. They're the ones that investigate them. But we just don't have a full contingent of traffic officers to enforce the traffic laws. And, when our patrol officers try to stop somebody and they just take off, I mean, that's, our officers have to just watch them drive away. That gets a little demoralizing after a while too. So.
Well, thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Mr. Bulkey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, you mentioned the jail. What's the situation at both jails now when it comes to COVID protocols and the booking?
Yeah, nothing's really changed. Nisqually is definitely more open than Pierce County. Pierce County Jail is still following the health department and the CDC guidelines for their facility. So they're managing the best they can, but nothing has really changed. Since we can book for serious violent crimes, but some of the lower stuff, like I've said, the possession of stolen property, like a car, possession of a stolen firearm, things like that, we're not able to book for.
Well, and yeah, it's my joke nowadays is the national sport really is car theft. Really, that's what we do for our national pastime. Even my daughter's roommate in college in another state, right out of their apartment complex, got she got the car back, but it got stolen just because, right? It was an old Honda or something. So clearly the car guys aren't going in at all, no. Right? Yeah.
No.
So
go ahead.
Go ahead while I collect my thoughts.
Well, and I was going to say, I think I emailed you all the shift briefing regarding the attempted robbery and shot fired at the industrial park in Woodbrook, where a truck was stolen, an F-250, that led us on a pursuit, and only because he fired a round in the parking lot were we able to pursue. But that was, you mentioned getting it back. The victim of that bought that truck brand new in 1997 and hardly ever drove it. and then, this guy crashes through a fence with it, gets in a pursuit with it, pretty much wrecks the truck. So the real victims out there, it's not, I get that it's a property crime, but these are real victims that are having to deal with this.
So I do, when we look at the numbers, I do salute your force, your guys, your gals, your officers, or maybe it's just a sign of the times, but you are catching a number of people for weapons law violations. So you are able to identify people, I guess, or find people who have guns illegally. And I don't know how you're accomplishing that, but your numbers on that are up.
They are, and it's it used to be that people tried that when they weren't supposed to have a gun, they tried to hide it. People are just so brazen now about them that they really make it easy.
Oh, well,
I'd like to say it was, through more, diligent police work, but really it's just, there's so many guns out there and people are just brazen about it.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Brandstetter.
Thanks, Mayor. Chief, I just had a couple of questions about a couple of statistics you gave us. You had a slide with, it's called CAD, shots and shootings, and sort of significant increase to do that. But Are the numbers on that slide unduplicated numbers, or do they include 8 people called about the same person shooting off?
No, those are as close to unduplicated as we could get.
Okay. And then right at the beginning of your briefing, you had a thing of where you noted that this quarter, we saw an increase in arrests for felony arrests and things to do that. But I was wondering, leveraging that against Mr. Boki's question about booking, is that increase in arrests leading to being able to book more people, or is it just, I mean, what's the outcome of an arrest these days?
Well, the felony arrest, if it's a felony arrest, that we're going to be able to book them. And what I think that represents is that just there's more serious crime going on that's serious enough for us to be able to book when we catch them.
Okay. Thanks, Chief.
Unrelated to the statistics, but definitely related to your efforts. When do you anticipate that body cameras will be fully deployed?
Well, that's kind of hard to say. We were supposed to have them delivered in early October, and they aren't even here yet. So we're still working on just getting them in the door, and then looking at we'll work on deployment after that. So we do still have some work to do and work through working through some language with the guild on activation protocols and all that. But hopefully after the first of the year, but it's just, like I said, they haven't even been delivered yet.
Can you work through the language with the guild for the MOU and at least get the trainers trained before then in anticipation of them coming in?
Oh yeah. Yes, we can. And we're working on that.
Thanks. Any other questions for the chief? Well, it appears your tough job is tougher, and thank you for your diligence. Appreciate the report.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
We now move to a review of transportation capital project financing strategy with Ms. Krauss.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm going to share my screen. And can you all see my screen?
It's pretty small, but we can see it.
Okay, so this is a follow-up to a meeting that of August 9th. So on August 9th, our Public Works Director, Paul Busage, provided the transportation projects that are being proposed. And so as a next step for that was to really take a look at the financing that goes along with it. But as you can see in your packet, we spent quite a bit of time talking about the financing and the potential projects. And that started back in September 2019, where we presented some financing options at the September 28th, 2019 retreat. Those financing packages included a vehicle licensing fee, issuing bonds, using the TBD monies to pay for the debt service, a property tax levy lid, a property tax excess levy, and we even looked at the B&O tax. So a lot of the information was provided to the City Council back in September 2019. Then we had the issue of the $30 car tab initiative, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the cities, or in favor of the TBD monies. We then talked about it during the 21 and 22 adopted budget process, and we provided some potential financing in that budget. And then in February 2021, we came back to the City Council and continued to provide a recommendation for option 3, which is issuing bonds in the neighborhood of $11.3 million. And so that is why we're here today. It's not really to talk about the projects themselves, but to really look at the recommended financing strategy and for those proposed TBD funded projects. So we're looking at 7 projects being funded by the debt service or the bond issue. And the bond issue needed is about $11.6 million. So there are 7 projects that have been identified. They're all laid out in the priority order, as you can see in the second portion of the chart or the table. So what we're looking at is a $20 vehicle licensing fee. At the end of 2022, we estimate there will be $1,718,000. The real estate excise tax available at the end of 2022 is almost $2.7 million. And then our real estate excise tax has been increasing over the number of years. The current estimate for 23 and 24 was $1.8 million. So I'm just increasing it by $242,000 to get us to $2 million per year. Surface water management revenues would pay for their portion of the storm drainage, and that comes out to about $1.8 million through 2026, leaving about $11.6 million to be funded by general obligation bonds. Those general obligation bonds would be paid back with the $20 vehicle licensing fee. So on the schedule, you can see sort of the timing of when these bonds would be issued. So looking at in 2023, maybe a $2 million bond issue, and then in 2024, about 9.6 to get us to $11.6 million. So that's pretty consistent with what we provided to the City Council previously. I'm going to skip over to the next few pages because you've already seen them. They're just basically information on the projects themselves. But our next steps is based on what the City Council's direction is. One thing that we need to do, because the transportation bond, the transportation benefit district is set to expire in 2032. If we were to do a bond issue, we would need to extend the transportation benefit district life. The other thing is we need to update the project list. So projects that have been completed that had transportation benefit district funds, as well as projects that are eligible for those funds. And then if the City Council were to approve the bond issue and the projects that are associated with that, we would need to put that into a budget adjustment. And this can be done as part of the carry forward budget adjustment or earlier. And then lastly, if there is the opportunity for a bond issue, we need to prepare the bond ordinance for City Council approval. So that concludes my presentation.
Great. Questions for Ms. Krauss, Mr. Whalen?
Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you, not very loud, but I can hear you.
Okay.
And could you share your screen, please?
Can I do what?
Unshare the screen. There.
Sure.
Oh, there you go. I was looking at the chart you had there, Todd. My 2 questions on the sources and uses. You could maybe pull that up where it shows a $20 card tab fee. My question is, why does it only show the source of that in 2022 and not all the way across through 2026?
And the reason why I'm not showing it in 23 to 2026 is the revenues that are coming in totals about $835,000. Those revenues are not available for capital projects as they would be used to pay the debt service.
Okay. And then, okay. So the chart is accurately depicting in light years, right?
You're breaking up. I didn't hear that.
The chart, sorry about that. The chart is a bit confusing because it seems to underrepresent the funds available in those given years, at least for me.
Okay, so looking at the sources side of it, this is looking at the monies that are available for the capital projects. If I looking at the first line, the $20 vehicle licensing fee, those monies are available for capital projects that are listed. But beginning in 2023, if we are going to issue bonds of $11.6 million, the money that is coming in from the $20 vehicle licensing fee is going to be used for paying the debt service. In hindsight, what I could have done is shown the debt service payments beginning in 2023 of $835,000 and shown the TBD revenues coming in to pay that debt service. I think that would have eliminated some confusion.
Right. And then the question, when you refer to the bottom part of that chart, that the funds are going to be allocated in the rough priorities, it's a little confusing to me because you see monies allocated in 22, 23, 24, 25 that are different than the top to bottom priority listing. So I wasn't sure why that would be. Is it because they're in a different stage of readiness?
So we're looking at the projects at the bottom portion where it lists the different projects. That is based on when they plan to have design or construction costs. But looking at the sources portion of it, the TBD revenues are available at the end of 2022 in the total amount of 1.7 million. I avoided spreading it out to match the expenditures because then it would look like we have money coming in 23 and 24 for both the TBD licensing fee and the real estate excise tax. If these monies were available, the monies are available, but if the city council were to approve these capital projects, we would budget for them in those years, but we would allocate the funding in advance so that it comes right out of the transportation benefit district funds. Same with the real estate excise tax, because we wouldn't want to have it sitting there and show an ending fund balance if it's really committed for a project. So project length, it works out. But just between the years because of the availability of funds and when the expenditures would actually occur.
And it all balances, right?
Yes.
All right, good.
Let's see, we go to Mr. Brandstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Ms. Krauss, I too have some questions regarding Exhibit A that in the proposed TBD funded projects list that's there. And so I understand that from your explanation that the very first line under sources, the TBD $20 vehicle license fee is shows money in 2022 because there will be, but after that, there's no license fee money to spend because it will all be dedicated to debt service. But the bonds will have been sold, so the money shows up down under general obligation bonds. Is that the right way to interpret that?
Yes.
Okay. So when you extend this chart out to 2042 or 43, and while there are, the projects will all have been completed by 2026, but when we start looking at sources and funds that are available, that are there going to be no TBD $20 vehicle license fee dollars available until sometime in the 2040s if we sell bonds now?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, I guess that seems, to me, that seems troubling that we would be telling people for nearly 20 years to keep paying vehicle license tab fees for things that are not current needs, but are things we paid for in the past. So if we were to not sell the bonds, how does this chart look about, obviously we couldn't finish all of these things by 2026, but how far out, how many years out would that have to be extended if we were to use a combination of pay-as-you-go with respect to TBD dollars, or maybe use other revenue sources to sell some bonds going on off? Would that be the impact? Is that these projects would just take longer than 2026 if we didn't sell bonds? Or could we sell bonds with another revenue source for the debt service? Some combination of that.
So if we were to take a look at $11.6 million in general obligation bonds, if we were to just do a pay-as-you-go based on the Transportation Benefit District, it would take us 14 years to have that much money to spread over these projects. That means these projects would not get done through 2026, because 2026 is really just 5 years. It would take us like 2.5 times as long, more than 2.5 times as long to finish these projects. And typically that wouldn't work out, because now you've got, if you start construction, what's that going to look like if you have to have enough to finish it? In terms of what other sources we have, we've got the $2.7 million in the real estate excise tax that could be added to the $835,000 on a pay-as-you-go. The real estate excise tax has already been dedicated for the debt service for a large portion of it. It's currently about $1.3 million that is going to pay for the debt service that the city council approved for the 3 years. It was like $17.6 million. So a good portion of the real estate excise tax is already being used. And then we did the 6-year capital plan, and we had already earmarked some of the real estate excise tax to pay for that. So real estate excise tax would be your other option. The other option is to look for towards the general fund, but the general fund is already paying into capital projects of about $700,000 annually.
Okay, so if we commit the Transportation Benefit District revenues to the $11.7 million in bond proceeds, that we would be able to complete the 7 projects by 2026, and then for the next, but then for the next 15 years, we wouldn't be able to do any projects with TBD funding.
Yes, that's correct.
And in that period of time, we'd have to also, we or a future council would have to take action to extend the life of the TBD and the $20 vehicle licensing fee beyond when it's due to expire now.
You actually would want to take action if you decide to issue bonds. You really should take action to extend that if you're looking at 20-year bonds, rather than waiting till we get to the point of 2032 to make that decision. Because what you're approving is the authorization of the bonds for 20 years. And with that goes the life of the TBD.
Okay. And is there an option, instead of using the TBD $20 license fee to pay for the bonds, to use 900,000 of general fund dollars to pay for general obligation bonds to get to 11.7 million?
You could always use the general fund for anything, but really what you have to take a look at is you're committed to paying $900,000 of the bonds using general fund dollars. Is that sustainable for the general fund to do that over the next 20 years?
And is it your opinion that it's not?
I really couldn't say. There's a lot of uncertainty. We've done very well the last year with the COVID, but I can't say that moving forward into the future or making an obligation of $900,000 a year for the next 20 years.
So that then in your next steps, you indicated that in order to move forward, we would have to put something in the 2022 carry forward budget? Or does this not have to, it's not a budgeting issue until the 23-24 biennium?
If we are going to, let me go back to that table. If we are going to have some of the projects be spent in 2022, we should identify those projects as an expenditure in 2022 and allocate the sources to that project. So right now you have project 10, which is Ardmore, Whitman, and 93rd, and that's $348,000. And you also have the Hipkins. But as part of the, if you were to move forward with the bond ordinance, we should be identifying the projects that are being funded with those bond proceeds. And because they are attached to the Transportation Benefit District, which also has an ordinance to list out those projects, those should all really be done at once, so they're solid, I guess.
Okay, and with the last general obligation bonds that we did to fund some projects that are underway and being completed, we didn't sell them all at once, if I recall.
That's correct.
Is
This
there an option given this table to sell some in 1 year and some 2 years later and some 2 years later?
So what we would go back to the city council with is some parameters for the bond issuance. So basically it would say that we would issue a total of $11.6 million plus some costs to cover the debt issue cost. And so it might be something higher than that, just to cover those other debt issuance costs. In the parameters would also state, a certain interest rate. It would also state that in no more than 20 years, but it would also provide some flexibility because we want to take advantage of market conditions as well. If we're so set on issuing just the $2 million and the market is very attractive, we wouldn't want to bind ourselves in that as long as overall the debt service matures within the 20 years. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I understand. I understand the answer. I guess I need to give this some thought because I'm not completely comfortable of going nearly 20 years collecting transportation benefit district dollars, but that it's all going to projects that have occurred in the past, and that the transportation benefit district is not being used in the long term for the current needs of capital and maintenance things for our transportation needs. I somewhat see the transportation benefit district on a pay-as-you-go basis of, while these are all projects that I'd like to see funded and would use TBD dollars for, I'm not sure that spending them all between now and 2026 and not doing any work with those dollars after 2026, while at the same time extending the district. I'm not sure that I'm fully supportive of that, and would want to think about what other options there might be. But, Mr. Mayor, that's all I really have in terms of observations right now.
Mr. Caulfield? You're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of comments here. The first is I can say with a high degree of certainty that the general fund does not have the capacity to fund general obligation bonds. Maybe a year or two, actually, I would even say probably not, given the level of increased costs that we're seeing just caused by inflation alone. So to try and bond general obligation bonds in support of any capital out of the general fund is just not going to pencil. And then secondly, the benefit of issuing bonds like this is really twofold. One is that you're able to fund more projects in a shorter period of time for a lower cost. Because if, as Ms. Krauss pointed out, if we were to go pay as you go, not only would there be less projects, but the cost would be much, much greater because the value of these 7 projects would then have to be forecasted at a higher rate, 5, 10, 15 years from now. So for example, Nyanza would go from a $3.9 million project to potentially a $7, $8, or $9 million project. And that's just a fact of life. So again, the real benefit of issuing bonds is more project at a lower cost, and you get them done a whole lot quicker. Because also your revenues are growing at a much, much slower rate, if growing at all. So that's the benefit of amortization. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Bolke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions, Ms. Krauss or whoever can answer it. The TBD we originally did for pavement preservation, at least that was the goal. I know we talked about various projects too. So my concern is that we'd have to make up the pavement preservation. And I looked at the pavement preservation numbers that you were, and I'd actually like to put more money into pavement preservation. And I think when we have the discussion going into the next biennial budget, that I'd like to get closer between pavement preservation and chip sealing, closer to $1 million a year. So I'd like to know the impact of that. What's the plan? Is it to come at the pavement preservation then to be solely paid out of the general fund? And is then that, well, answer that question, please.
Mr. Caulfield?
Actually, I'll take that one, Ms. Krauss. Actually, you're doing it. 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, pavement preservation started off with just some really simple, straightforward overlays. You have actually exceeded that. You have, over the last handful of years, transitioned into complete street reconstruction. And that's what you see here. You see a continuation of that. So actually, the need for just general overlays and street preservation is actually diminished because you're rebuilding complete streets and adding curbs, gutters, and sidewalks and things along those lines. But at the same time, the budget, as currently structured and built, still continues to provide preservation funds in support of, for example, pavement patching, chip seal, and then an overlay here or there if one is needed. But again, you've moved beyond overlays. You've moved into street reconstruction and street rebuilds.
Okay, so what is it? I mean, So next year and it's in here somewhere and I can't find it now. We're putting upwards of about $700,000-800,000 a year in pavement preservation and chip sealing.
That sounds about right, Councilmember. Yes.
Okay.
It's a pretty significant investment. Yeah.
Okay. So does a TBD have to have a sunset date?
I don't know that. I don't believe it does, but I think it's prudent that for transparency and certainty that it should. That would be my recommendation.
Okay. And then we do have some bond issues we're paying out of the general fund. I mean, I would note that we have this thing from 59th Avenue that's, I think, gone in a couple of years for $77,000 this year or last year or something. I don't know what it was. We're in 2021 right now. And then we also have the local LED street light. Is that getting paid out of the general fund? And then eventually the police station's gone. So somewhere midway, if we did this, midway, we have over $400,000 a year in freed up general fund monies. So I would note that we do have debt obligations in the general fund that are going to get paid off.
So that's correct, Councilmember Boki. And the good news is that that's going to happen. However, the not so good news is, again, general fund revenues are growing at a smaller rate than our general operating expenditures. So it is likely that some of those funds will end up just, picking up and biting into, the larger pieces of inflation that we're beginning to experience.
Okay.
I would also like to point out that, the city has very, very limited debt. We do not have a lot of debt. So, you're in a good place to be able to issue debt and get good interest rates. And then you have the ability to repay it without any concerns.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I just think we need to figure out how we're gonna cover 20 years of debt with this. So, okay, that's it.
Mr. Whalen.
My microphone works. I just want to voice thanks to Ta and staff for coming up with the financing recommendations and strategies. I think from a 30,000 foot level, we need to remind ourselves that we asked and we chewed on these priorities of projects that would likely not avail themselves of grant funding. And this was a way, as the manager indicated, to get projects done. And we've identified our priority projects that would not otherwise get grant funding, because on the next page, we see those projects that would likely be grant eligible and or potentially funded by Sound Transit. So my recommendation is for us to follow through with the work plan that we've set into motion and to adopt the funding strategy and recommendation. I think it makes good sense because the costs only grow over time and it doesn't get better with age.
I would second Mr. Whalen's comments. I am in favor of moving forward with what I think is an exceptionally well thought out plan, filling the hole of what we have prioritized as needed projects that may languish for years and only escalate in cost. And I don't know that you could find an economist who would say that our revenues from the TBD will go up enough to cover the inflationary costs of increased construction costs over a 10 to 15 year period, that it would be extended if we didn't bond it now. So except with especially now with, who knows what's going to be in 6 months, but now we have exceptionally low interest rates, and locking that in would be quite advantageous. So thank you, Ms. Krauss. Is there anything further from council on this? Thanks. Then we'll move to a review of the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA program budget ordinance, again with Ms. Krauss.
So I presented the mid-biennium budget adjustment on October 11th. And as part of that mid-biennium budget adjustment, I included the ARPA funds. And as a result of that, well, actually through the review process, it was discovered by Councilmember Brandstetter that we had not captured the programs as adopted by the City Council. What I had pulled was information directly from the ordinance, and the ordinance incorrectly included YMCA and the Boys and Girls Club. So City Council asked there be two separate budget adjustments, one for the mid-biennium without the ARPA funds, and then one for the ARPA funds. So what you're seeing here is a total of almost $4.2 million that are programs that have been approved by the City Council. And that excludes the YMCA, Boys and Girls Club. And that's basically the change. If the City Council were to approve this ordinance, that would leave about $9.6 million for the City Council to consider at a later date. And that later date comes November 22nd, where Ms. Spears will be presenting some additional ARPA funds. But what you're seeing in this packet as the proposed ARPA programs is what was approved, what you intended to approve as part of the ordinance. So that concludes my presentation.
Questions for Ms. Krauss? Mr. Bulkey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Krauss, I would like to ask you and the city manager to periodically update us, and if that means quarterly on these expenditures. Because, for instance, I was a big fan when we talked before about rebuilding together South Sound, and we've heard good things about them, and we've given them money in other channels. But I don't know that I've actually seen, here are how many houses we actually worked on, and here's what we did for the money. So, I mean, that's just an example. The Habitat, the Boat Street project, that's going to take a while, I think. But it's those kind of things. The BIPOC business accelerator that the county is going to operate. I'd like to hear about those things. So if you could commit, and I'm including the city manager in this remarks, if you could commit to telling us, kind of giving us specifics as how this ARPA money was spent. I know you have to do it anyway because you got to report on it. So if you could let us know, I would appreciate that.
So, Councilmember Boki, I would just add, just like any program that the council moves forward, this will show up in a future quarterly financial report. That is the mechanism that this will be reported to you. And as you know, that report is very, very comprehensive and gets into a level of detail second to none. So that's where you can expect to see that occur.
Okay. And I also want to add that that's very consistent with the financial policies. In the financial policies, we say that we will continue to enhance the reports, and this is a pretty big deal. So yes, definitely.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, we could also on a group like that, we could also have them come in at some later date and report to us and show us some fancy pictures or something like that. I wouldn't mind that. So I'll just leave it at that, though. Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Thanks for the update. And we will move on to a review of the 2022 Comprehensive Plan Amendment Docket. For this, we have Planning Manager Tiffany Spear.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Tiffany Spear, Long Range and Strategic Planning Manager. I will also share my screen. So as was just stated by the mayor, what we're doing here is giving you a preview of the proposed comprehensive plan map or text amendments for the 2022 cycle. This process has made its way through the Planning Commission. They held their public hearing on September 15th, and then on October 6th adopted its resolution 2021-04. It recommended 7 proposed amendments to the City Council. I'll be going through the first and the second one in more detail, and then the remainder are relatively straightforward, but there's some additional information in part requested by the council, but just to clarify the first 2. So the first one is labeled as reviewing zoning policies and city code related to tree preservation, and then this mentions specifically the redesignation and rezoning of acreage where there's a Gary Oak Preserve near the St. Clair Hospital. But this is going to be a citywide review of the tree preservation program. And there has been discussion, as I understand, by city council members to the city manager, and also just the practicalities of how long this type of a review may take, has evolved this now from an amendment to include in the 22 comp plan docket to a recommendation that this actually be pulled out of the docket and handled as its own effort. And so when the information comes to the council for consideration as part of the public hearing, it will be recommended that this is actually pulled from the docket and considered in its own ordinance process. What you see toward the bottom of the screen is some of the summary of the staff recommendations and then policy considerations related to tree preservation. I know that on September 27th, Mr. Buer worked through this and more details for the council. The second one is related to Telecom, and as titled, it's the update of the Telecoms 2011 neighborhood plan, which will be a technical review just to see what within that plan needs to be updated, because either things planned have been completed or maybe there are obsolete items within that plan. And then also a review of the Telecom Center of Local Importance, which at least since 2014 has been designated, as you see on the map on the lower left. That purplish color is showing you the overlay of the Center of Local Importance. And so between these 2 reviews, there would be a review of densities and zoning and maybe infrastructure needs, et cetera, within the Telecom area. And then that information would be coming for the City Council's review next spring as part of the comprehensive plan package, if approved by council now. So to provide you a little more detail about this one, this is in some respects related to a Habitat for Humanity project that was discussed during the 2021 comprehensive plan amendments. If you'll recall, there were 4 parcels here, they're shown in red, that were rezoned for what was termed the Boat Street project. And now there's a 5th parcel, which is now in blue down here, that's been incorporated into the project as well. The Habitat staff submitted this as a proposed rezone in the 22 package, but because it is a single parcel, it would be a site-specific rezone and would be handled separately in a different part of the city code. But instead of doing that process, which is not recommended, it's not easy, it's not, and it is time consuming, staff is recommending actually that this parcel discussion happen as part of the larger Telecom review. So taking a look again at the Center of Local Importance, density and zones, as well as the 2011 neighborhood plan, just incorporating the consideration of this parcel zone as part of 2022-02 altogether. Just a little more detail about the area we're talking about. The staff have developed 2 options that might also be coming forward to you next spring if this gets included in the package. One would be to expand the rezone area to this entire block. So it would be more than just those 4 and then 5th parcel for the Habitat, but additional parcels as well. Or an even larger option would be not only that area on the southwest side of Wadsworth, but also would include additional parcels to the north of Wadsworth along Silcox. And then you would see in this case, there are actually separate parcels in between where this is not all one adjacent section. There are some parcels in between. So again, this option and the previous one would require obviously additional analysis. It's not what Habitat requested, but it's something that might come out of the analysis of the neighborhood plan and the Center of Local Importance. So all of these options would be coming under review, assuming the council proceeds with recommending this be added to the docket list. The remainder of the amendments, as I mentioned, are pretty straightforward. Number 2022-03 is a review of the housing chapter, and this would be for compliance with the new Vision 2050 multi-county planning policies, the county-wide planning policies, Lakewood's City Council diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, House Bill 1220, which has a lot of different ideas and recommendations related to housing programs, and more. 04 would be looking at whether or not the city would change its current position, which prohibits residential construction and residential uses within Air Corridor 1 and 2 because of DOD and FAA safety guidance, whether that would change to allow adult family homes in those two zones. The fifth is to just do a technical update of the comprehensive plan throughout to make sure it reflects Vision 2050 language version versus Vision 2040. Amendment 2022-06 is going through and making sure that various maps within the comprehensive plan are up to date. A number of them relate to parks and would be updated per the 2020 Parks Legacy Plan. There's also sub-area mapping that needs some updates, and also in the Telecom neighborhood and city landmarks mapping. The final one is a request that came from the City Council. This is to review citywide and sub-area wide parking requirements. I don't know if you can see this on the screen the way it's being broadcast, but 18A80 is the citywide parking requirements that were adopted in December of 2019. And then 18C relates specifically to the Lakewood Station sub-area, and that was adopted this May in Ordinance 751. So taking a look at both of those parking sections of code. As it stands, tonight's study session is to introduce these to you. On November 1st, a public hearing is scheduled. November 15th would be the date for council to take action on the docket. And then over winter into next spring and summer, there would be a substantive review of the various items included in the docket, and then substantive review by Planning Commission that would then make recommendations back to council for review and consideration. So I'll stop sharing, and if there's any questions, Mr. Mayor, I'm ready to answer.
Questions for Ms. Spear? I guess I have a question for council while we're on this topic, because we haven't had a chance to discuss it between us. But is there anyone who has any strong feelings that we shouldn't carve out the tree code for special consideration and place it outside the main track? Mr. Branstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, in response to your inquiry, I'm in favor of carving it out and setting up an alternative process. I think this process, where it's one of a great many items that the Planning Commission has to deal with, will not give us the advantage of having the maximum amount of community input on all sides of how tree preservation ordinances impact the community. And so an alternative process that will lead to an amended ordinance that I don't think has to be a part of the comprehensive planning process would be actually my preference.
All right. Well, I think it looks like I see no objections. We'll keep pursuing that track. Thank you, Ms. Spear.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to reports by the city manager, Mr. Caulfield.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council. I got a few updates for you. The first is some exciting news is that we are going to have a soft launch of our new Permit Pals Plus software system, which is a partnership with Pierce County. We've been working on this since the middle part of 2018. And so that soft launch is going to occur on Wednesday. And so those folks that currently have their permit systems within our Eden system are going to begin to transfer over. And so we're very, very excited about this. I do want to recognize our planning manager, Courtney Brunell, who has been serving point on this for a number of years in getting this up and running and working the details. Likewise, it is a team effort, including representation from our finance department and our IT department as well. But overall, we're very, very excited about this moving forward. One of the key attributes of the system is that with the new system, we will be collecting full plan check fees at the time when they do submit, as opposed to having them pay at a later date. And that's just part of the way the system works. It's also a best business practice. We've been behind the power curve on that a little bit as well, and it has created some problems in the past where folks, were trying to issue permits and they haven't paid. So that's also kind of a key benefit of transitioning to this new system. But again, we are very happy that we're going to be moving forward again. So a soft opening on Wednesday. This next item, I am looking for some council. Actually, my recommendation is that we sign on to this letter that I'm going to talk about. And it relates to South Sound 911 and the 1/10 of 1% sales tax that was approved by the voters a number of years ago to fund South Sound 911. I think, as you know, I've been participating in a South Sound 911 work group that's been chaired by the board chair of South Sound 911, who happens to be the mayor of Puyallup, Julie Dorr. And the purpose of that subcommittee is to make a recommendation and help with the transition of the E911 fees from Pierce County to South Sound 911, hopefully beginning next year. Other members of that work group or subcommittee includes Jim Sharp, West Pierce Fire and Rescue's fire chief, the police chief from Fife, Pete Fisher, the fire chief from Central Pierce Fire and Rescue, Dan Olson, and myself. So the good news on this is, the very good news is that Pierce County, particularly the Pierce County executive, has included in his proposed biennial budget for 22 and 23 to transfer those E911 fees over to South Sound 911 is essentially the only PSAP in Pierce County. So that's very, very positive. And that's something, the city of Lakewood has been very, very supportive of going back a number of years. So, we thank Pierce County and the Pierce County executive for doing that. On the other hand, the Pierce County executive's budget also includes, I would define as not either taking or not transferring all of the 1/10 of 1% sales tax dollars that had been going to South Sound 911, rather keeping that in Pierce County and using those monies to fund radio operations. I do want to say that the question is not about the use of the monies, because using the monies in support of radios is actually a core responsibility of not just South Sound 911, but more importantly, these monies. So using the monies in support of radios is a good thing. As a matter of fact, the South Sound 911 board is actually expected to have a work study session on that sometime in the early part of 2022. I believe it might even be a January, one of their January work sessions. The policy question is, who makes the decision in how the 1/10 of 1% sales tax dollars are allocated? The way it's being presented to the Pierce County Council is that the Pierce County Council does that. Well, the South Sound 911 board, as well as just about all the other agencies, believe that the authority in allocating those 1/10 of 1% sales tax dollars rest with the elected body of South Sound 911. And so there are a number of letters that are being sent to the Pierce County Council. Matter of fact, I do know the chair and the vice chair of South Sound 911 have had some conversations with the chair of the county council on this issue as well. And matter of fact, he is actually in the process of seeking a legal opinion from his attorneys on this. But again, South Sound 911, the board of directors, they're sending a letter to the Pierce County Council chair and the county council as a whole, expressing their position on this. Likewise, the police chiefs, all the police chiefs in Pierce County have sent a letter I learned late last week that the group representing all of the fire commissioners in Pierce County are doing the same. And then likewise, I talked to Jim Sharp, our own fire chief from West Pierce Fire and Rescue, and all of the fire chiefs are going to be sending a similar letter that the police chief sent last week. And so what I'm asking this evening is that Lakewood sign on to a similar letter. And this letter would be signed by representatives of the agencies that essentially founded South Sound 911, which would be West Pierce Fire and Rescue, Lakewood, Puyallup, Fife, and Tacoma. Now, normally Pierce County would be included in that. However, Pierce County is of a different opinion on this issue. And those agencies I just listed are in the process of reaching out to their respective legislative bodies, just as I am doing this evening. And my recommendation is that we do sign on to this letter. Again, the issue is not how the monies are being used, because completely appropriate in how the county is recommending the monies being used. The issue is who makes the decision. And so that's kind of the crux of the issue here. I know I did provide a draft copy of that letter, but if the council's interested, I know the city clerk is standing by and is able to pull it up and can share it on the screen if we need to do that. But again, my recommendation is that we be a signatory to that letter. So with that, maybe if there's any questions from the mayor and the council, and I know actually I think Councilmember Branstetter sitting on the South Sound 911 board. He too is actually closer to this issue than I am. So you might want to provide an opportunity for him to provide some feedback on behalf of the elected board itself.
I will do that. I'll go to Mr. Branstetter after I exercise my prerogative to give the other side. I would recommend that we not take any action. I've worked intimately with South Sound 911 in this issue over the last 4 years with the county. This is my position, not the county's position. The proposed budget, which has to go through council, actually provides for a net positive cash flow to South Sound 911, and they have just put an extra $5 million in reserve, and they have no plan to spend this money. The 0.1% tax was passed primarily because of a public outcry when Sheriff Kent Mundell was killed and the radio system in the county didn't work. It was passed for two purposes. It was passed for radios, an integral part of the 911 system, and the PSAP, the public safety answering platform. So the radio system has been heavily subsidized through the E911 money and some Pierce County general fund money. The rate charged is about $35 a unit. The cost is over $100 a unit. South Sound 911 is not a radio provider and has never been a radio provider. It doesn't have towers, equipment, personnel. That is run primarily by Tacoma and the Pierce County Emergency Management, who have cooperated to build an integrated system and are working toward consolidating that. The goal of the budgetary proposal is to move toward a fee-free, user fee-free radio system where the subscribers, including Lakewood, West Pierce, smaller districts particularly, do not pay a fee, and that the money that's from the 0.1% goes in large part to, in addition to paying for the building that South Sound 911 is in, which is owned by the county, would go to essentially paying for the subscriber fees, and the replacement radios for everyone was particularly a need in the small districts. This is a county tax. The legislature authorized the county to impose a tax over the entire county, both the members of the PDA and the non-members, everybody pays it. It's the county council is the legal authority for appropriating the money. It may give all the money, it may choose to give all the money to South Sound 911, but that's the real, what they're saying is the real issue is who gets to appropriate the money. The real, just like us, we can't give somebody else the authority to appropriate taxes that we collect. It's an essential function of the legislative body, in this case of the county. Now, as far as the actual merits underlying this, through the county's efforts, the South Sound 911 building was going to cost over $80 million. $20 million was saved. The projections of what they needed to fund that building, the debt service costs went way down. The county finance department financed the bonds at such an attractive rate that there was actually more money that came to the county than there was debt on the bonds. Hard to explain, but basically they got $57 million for $52 million of cost. Those cash flow opportunities didn't exist in the pro forma covering the cost of the building. And the initial radio bond expires in a couple of years and has the ability to fund a fee-free radio system when that cash flow comes up. So this isn't an end all, but somebody has to take the first step, and there's a biennial budget. And it may be that South Sound 911 gets all the money, that's the county council's prerogative. But if measures aren't taken to move toward a consolidated fee-free radio system, it will languish. And if you think that handing extra millions of dollars to South Sound 911, a PDA, which is a in some senses like Sound Transit, it's electeds and non-electeds, but it's not directly responsible to any taxpayers as far as votes go, giving them millions of dollars and trusting them to develop a radio system when they don't have a single piece of equipment. I just don't have faith in that. So I don't, and right now also the information I have is there's an internal debate at Tacoma as to what they are going to do. I had that as of Friday. So I would strongly recommend for Mr. Branstetter gives the counterpoint that we not take any action. If we do, we put it on the docket and vote on it. Mr. Branstetter.
Yeah, okay, Mr. Mayor. And I will not dispute the importance of the issue that the county executive budget is seeking to address. The concern about that issue is shared by the South Sound 911 board. Their strategic planning process is scheduled to be working around that in 2022, but the immediate concern, again, as the city manager mentioned, is the changing from the status quo of the process of budgeting the proceeds from the 1% tax. It has been the case that the county has collected that tax, but that per the agreements that exists has passed those dollars through to South Sound 911, and the South Sound 911 through their budgeting process has budgeted it to include budgeting for it to be portions to be returned and held by Pierce County to pay debt service and other operations to do that. And the concern really is that this is the first instance since the tax came into being that the the county has begun to consider a process of not turning it all over and allowing the South Sound 911 board to do the budgeting of it and allocating of the budget. And I don't think that there is much dispute that the current use of the dollars that the county executive is asking the county council to approve would, in negotiation, be considered inappropriate or perhaps not even be doing that. I think the South Sound 911 board looks at it because it addresses a problem that has been being discussed going on. But the concern is the precedent of the process. Because, you know, what is the next good idea from the county that they feel they don't need to ask, they can just do in an arena of where the 911 world over the next years is going to see some changes as next generation 911 issues arise. So the South Sound 911 board has been asking various groups, the police chiefs, the fire commissioners, and the original stakeholders that were a part of both the forming South Sound 911 initially, and then as a part of the approving the conversion and governance to a PDA, to encourage the county to maintain the status quo budgeting process that has served the agency well and the community well. And I will agree with the mayor that the county moving forward and just doing this may kickstart something a few months or a year earlier. And the South Sound 911 board might do it because the South Sound 911 board and its planning work has identified 2022 as a significant strategic planning year to move beyond the construction of a new public safety communications center and being on the verge of having paid off the original purchase of radio equipment for agencies throughout the county. And so they would see that as the time to then launch into the next strategic initiative to deal with the problems of one of which is the cost of operating radio systems and to what extent the public safety aspects of those radio systems could or should be subsidized by 1% sales tax dollars. So, you know, I am I'm passing on the South Sound 911, and the board has not actually taken an action on this, but the executive committee of it that includes the chair and the vice chair and the operations committee have been asking different groups, to include the group of original formers, to express that thought to the county in the form of a letter. And we are one of the original formers of the organization, and I would say that if I would urge that if each of the other original formers are in concurrence with sending this letter, then we should join them in doing that.
Mr. Wayland.
At 9:30 at night, I tend to be a pretty simple person. Mr. Caulfield, the letter is basically only asking or directing or advising the county council that the original governing board should be the board that allocates the funds generated from the 1/10 of 1%. Is that right?
Affirmative, Deputy Mayor.
Okay. And is there any legal impediment to that structure? Because I'm hearing a little conflicting stuff, whether or not the county council has to, as the entity receiving the monies, I guess, right, has to allocate those as opposed to the governing board of the member organizations?
And so from our perspective, when I say our perspective,
right,
basically all the agencies in Pierce County, with the exception of Pierce County, believe legally that the responsibility of allocating the monies rests with the South Sound 911 board. But as the mayor pointed out, he's absolutely right. Actually, I agree with everything that the mayor has said, basically, as it relates to, the monies coming to Pierce County.
Right.
The monies do come to Pierce County, and then Pierce County turns them over to South Sound 911. Now, the exception on that has been the debt service on the radios and the building, because Pierce County has served as essentially the fiduciary agency.
Right.
However, now something a little different is happening, where they're taking a portion of the funds in support of an operational activity. And so that's the concern, because if it starts now, where is it going to end?
So the
And again,
concern is the siphoning off through their own budgetary process outside of the.
That's correct. That's correct. And again, we all concur that how the county wants to use the money is a good one. There's no objection to that. It's just who should give the blessing on that. Should it be the county council or should it be South Sound 911? The fact of the matter is, other than the debt service on the radios in the building, South Sound 911 makes all the policy decisions on the allocation of the 1/10 of 1% sales tax. And that's all we're saying here as well. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
This isn't a status quo matter, however, because this is a net gain of funding to South Sound 911. South Sound 911 has asked for the E911 money in its entirety. Didn't like the way the county was using it. County passed audit on a number of occasions with the state auditor's office that the uses were proper, but said, according to your wishes, the proposed budget is, here's the E911 money that you wanted. Now, we as the county, it says that there are things that are being done with that money that are a key portion of the emergency response network, the radio system. And you're using the 1/10 of 1% is proposed to be used for replacing that funding, subsidizing the operation of the radio system, which was the original purpose, the primary purpose in the public's mind of the tax when it passed. It's a county tax. It's not, there are agencies that aren't part of the PDA. And it's the only countywide organization, so the only taxing authority. South Sound 911, remember, was formed after the legislation authorizing the tax. And it has no taxing authority of its own. So while the building is being paid for by the county out of that money, the radios are being paid for by the county out of that money. And the proposal is essentially to work toward a fee-free radio system out of that money, with South Sound 911 getting all the U911 money and a significant portion and most of the benefit out of the 1/10 of 1%.
We also, Don, somewhat on the hook as member agencies if the county didn't have sufficient funding. It was a really weird contingent liability, but it seemed to
indicate that the board and the member agencies comprising that board should have more control because they had some contingent liability for the funding.
Well, what happens is that if that money doesn't go to the radio system, and the radios are charged at their real cost, that the member agencies would have to pay a much higher fee. I mean, that was the contingency.
With regard to the letter, would it be appropriate, from what I hear you say, that if we had a proviso in the letter, something to the effect that, assuming that the structure, passes legal merit or sufficiency or whatever, the funding, the money should come to the board. That's the position of the member agencies. And John, I hear what you're saying is that they've already reviewed that and they feel that it is the legal route to take, right?
Well, there isn't a formal legal opinion that everyone has passed on.
So I haven't seen a legal opinion other than, what past practice has been. However, I do know that the chair of the county council has requested a legal opinion of their attorneys. And so we're waiting on that. And again, the letters that are being sent to the county council is just simply, hey, this is our position. We understand that the money all comes to you. However, the decision-making body needs to be the South Sound 911 board and not the county council, because if it starts here, where is it going to end in the future? And again, the proposed uses of the funds is not in question here. The issue is who makes the decision.
Right. There's actually a provision in the legislation that says that the division has to be equitable. So the contingency of the county withholding all the money is one that's not legally supportable.
Is or is not?
Well, it isn't. Not if it's, but it's, as an attorney, that's equitable is a wide road.
And again, the purpose of the letter is just to bring additional awareness to the county council that this issue is out here. That's it. But again, the county council has already gotten a number of letters, so.
Right. I'm way too close to this on a day-to-day basis because it does have a budget impact in my day job. I think that the crux of the legal matter is that can the county basically give its appropriation authority over to another organization? And so if that's true, then any number of things, we could pass a 1/10 of 1% for housing and say, well, we're not going to appropriate, we're just going to give it to the local housing authority. So I don't know, it seems a little bit, the other thing going on is that the county operates the combined communications network, which is used by all these agencies that now want to defund it, essentially. It would force the county to probably have to go into general fund. And part of that is the subsidy for smaller towns. So I find it interesting that the police chiefs of these smaller towns are now willing to perhaps take on, without promising that they're going to pay to keep the monthly cost of those radios down, that they're jumping out ahead to try to grab this funding, that the county's under no obligation then to continue to subsidize these smaller cities. So, and it could be an impact, and I don't know what that impact is, and I don't know if there's an impact on Lakewood or not, but certainly there are smaller cities and smaller fire agencies. So I don't know that everyone's really looked at what's going on. The 1/10 of 1%, I believe, is for not just the PSAP. Remember, South Sound 911 I think it took over the old Lisa operations, which is keeping records, and it's a PSAP. It's an answering, the public safety answering point. They don't run. It's my understanding, the county, the CCN that the county and Pierce Transit, interestingly enough, put together has something like 20 antennas that the South Sound 911 doesn't operate, doesn't maintain. The county has to try to do that. This is the attempt. They were using those other funds that have now been given to South Sound 911. If they lose that, then the money's got to come from somewhere. So I don't know that. So first of all, there's the legal issue. Can counties give up their appropriation power to unelected bodies? And then there's the second question of who else is going to pay the bill for these for the radio operations that are going to be used. So but I don't hear anyone saying that South Sound 911 has agreed to take over all the network responsibilities and the radio responsibilities as of the 1st of January of 2022. So, I mean, they want the money, but they don't want the responsibility, is what it sounds like to me.
That's not what this is about.
So what would they do with the money, John?
The county would need to go talk to the South Sound 911 board about how those dollars are invested.
Okay. I mean, unelected group.
Well, they are elected. They're all elected.
By who?
The South Sound 911 board is comprised of elected officials. Councilmember Branstetter sits on.
But they're not elected for that position.
No, they're appointed by all of the respective legislative bodies within the county who are elected.
Correct.
Ms. Moss.
Mayor, there's a lot of illegal requirements being discussed, which is above my pay grade right now. But my thoughts are the governing body should be in control. So I'm looking at the board should be the one to control. I'm in favor of signing the letter. Because when we talk about being equitable, the board would be more accountable.
Mr. Branstetter.
Yeah, and again, it's a discussion about the process and precedent. I think the South Sound 911 board would prefer to field a request to use 1% money for the purpose of maintaining the CCN as both a viable item and holding costs down. And in past years, the South Sound 911 board has in fact allocated money of the 1% back to Pierce County and to the city of Tacoma in order to keep radio system costs down while concurrently looking for what's the best long-term solution to do that, working with folks to do that. So, and it's the process that has worked, for instance, with the debt service for radios or the debt service for the building is that money is allocated by the county to the South Sound 911 board with an agreement that the South Sound 911 board will allocate it back in a bond piece to do that. And the South Sound 911 budget shows those dollars as being returned to the Pierce County for the Pierce County to pay the debt service on them per the debt service agreement that was signed by South Sound 911 and the board. In the end, this I think this question is going to get resolved through a combination of some legal opinions and some discussions of folks that are ultimately by the county council. And I think that the issue about radio systems is the next major system question to be resolved in the 911 thing over there. It's been percolating for some time, but that I guess the South Sound 911 board is concerned about it. Then what's the next issue down the road then, and is it going to be as equally appropriate use of the money as this one is? Or is the South Sound 911 going to have some say to do that? This is also a sort of money that's this tax expires another 10 years down the road, and so how it's being used and the processes that use it are something that will then go back in front of voters to decide whether it will continue. And so I just restate my previous opinion that I think we should sign on to the letter if Tacoma, Fife, West Pierce, and Puyallup, the other entities who have a similar status to us, have a signature on the letter. But I'm also not saying that I'm not predicting how impactful the letter will be in the final solution either.
I'm fine with us signing on to the letter with the proviso that it's a letter stating the position, and the position is going to get sorted out legally one way or the other.
A couple of footnotes. The actual structure of the agreement with respect to the building is that the building is owned by Pierce County. It's financed with the full faith and credit of Pierce County supporting the bond. And an amount equal to the bond amortization is retained by the county out of the 0.1% and directly applied to that debt before anything goes to South Sound 911. South Sound 911 has treated it in its budget differently than the county has treated it. It has treated it like it was all paid to them and was then partially paid to the county. That it actually doesn't happen. It's probably an audit exception, but I'm not an auditor. And with respect to the money that's come back, that Mr. Brandstetter is correct, that there has been, over a period of time, a buy down of the rate by South Sound 911 because they had enough money in their 911 and sales tax proceeds to do that. In 2020, they budgeted $1 million and were nervous because of COVID and didn't pay that. Even though the revenue came into them, they did not pay that to the county, and the county had to backfill the $1 million they didn't send to the county to buy down the rates. So, who's to be trusted? There needs to be more transparency and some type of legal opinion, I think, before we can reach a position on what should happen. And so I'm not advocating to take a position. I'm advocating to take no position and wait until we see what the legal outcome is and what the Pierce County Council is likely to do with it.
Yeah. Does it give you any consensus there, city manager?
I don't think we can take a position unless there's outside a meeting with a vote, unless there's a consensus. I mean, a uniformity.
Yeah, I'm not hearing, I'm hearing 3 council members communicate to sign on to the letter with the caveat that all the other signatories would sign on to it.
I would.
I think you'll see the
Sorry.
Pierce County or the Tacoma City Council go through the same machinations shortly.
Yeah, I believe they're meeting tomorrow evening or tomorrow afternoon on this, Mayor.
Patty said something.
Sorry, I would support signing the letter, but with what you had spoken about, the provisos in the letter.
Well, let me report back what happens with the other agencies. But I am hearing that there is consensus to sign on to it if the other agencies are going to sign on. And then the question becomes, who signs it? Does the mayor sign it on behalf of the council, or do you want me to sign it?
I would sign it if there was an agendized vote of the council. Otherwise, I wouldn't. Absent uniformity, I don't think I have. It's appropriate for me to sign as mayor unless there's a uniformity among the council or there's a council vote.
So do we want to put this on the agenda for next Monday for council consideration and an official vote?
I think that would be appropriate. And we'll know more what's happening by then too.
Okay, we'll do that for next Monday, and then between now and then, perhaps we'll have some more information on what the other jurisdictions are doing. Just a few more updates. We've been contacted by Pierce County on another item. They are in the process of initiating an update to their comprehensive solid and hazardous waste management plan. I will say this, working in 3 counties, King, Snohomish, and Pierce County, that Pierce County, in my opinion, does this really, really well. Their comprehensive solid and hazardous waste management plan is very, very well prepared. It's very well implemented. Don't have a lot of problems or issues here in the county. And the last time, the current plan expires at the end of this year. It's a 20-year plan. I actually was involved in the one that's currently in place back in 2000. So we're back at it. However, pursuant to the RCW to initiate this, the county needs to have an ILA from all the cities and towns in Pierce County that we all agree to move forward with a new 20-year plan. And I hope to be able to bring forward that for your review and consideration, hopefully by the end of the year, if not sooner. So then, the city of Lakewood, we can work with all the other cities and towns in Pierce County and getting a new 20-year plan. But again, Pierce County, I think it falls under their public works department. They do a really good job in developing this plan and then implementing it. Also along those lines, something that we learned as it relates to transfer stations. So the Tacoma transfer station that's located on South Mullen Street in Tacoma. So the city of Tacoma earlier this summer, we were notified of this, or we found out a couple of weeks ago that that transfer station is now open to all Pierce County residents and not just Tacoma residents. So that's a little bit of a shorter trip rather than going out to Puyallup or going down to North Thurston County, right across the Nisqually Bridge there. We also are working with the Nisqually tribe on an agenda for a joint meeting. So myself and the CEO of the Nisqually tribe what we've heard from the tribe is they want to have a discussion with this body on really three things at this point in time. One is the renaming of Fort Steilacoom Park, and the mayor had a conversation with the tribe about that a couple of weeks ago. However, that is something that they want to have on the agenda. The second is a number of partnering opportunities down at Fort Steilacoom Park, and Mary Dodsworth and her team, our Parks and Rec director, have been working with representatives of the Nisqually tribe on this. And it's really in four different areas. One is some plaza seating and gathering area at the new, in the vicinity of where the new restrooms are, as well as a Chief Leshai story, the Nisqually Loop Trail, recognizing the Nisqually tribe. And then also something that this body has had some conversations about is some kind of an interpretive center or area recognizing the Nisqually tribe, perhaps as part of a future barn renovation project in the future. And then lastly, one good partnership project, perhaps to talk about is the city as well as SSMCP support of the improvements needed to address the bowing of the Nisqually River and the impact on the Nisqually Delta from Interstate 5 and the improvements that are needed there. So those are kind of the agenda items that we've identified. And I'll be working again with the CEO, Peter Ansara, about identifying a date and time for a joint meeting. And the Nisqually Tribal Council has offered to host that meeting as well. So more to follow on that. And then I'll just say on your calendar, next week, AWC is having their Cities on Tap event, which is really focused on upcoming legislative issues. The AWC board did pass a legislative agenda. That's usually a key topic. This year's event will again be virtual. And so if you're interested in attending that, let us know. You can register online, really easy to do that. It'll be on Thursday, November 5th. And it's from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. in the morning. And then that's Saturday and Sunday, November 6th and 7th. We're having our annual fall cleanup, and that'll be over at the Waste Connections transfer station off of 94th. And that will be from 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. on both Saturday and Sunday. And like in the past, we are looking for volunteers. So if any of you are interested in being out there and helping, check IDs and move folks forward and through the process, let us know, and we can identify a date and time for you to come out there. And then on November 9th, United Way is having their annual Poverty to Possibilities event, again, a virtual event. It's from 8 to noon on Tuesday, November 9th. This is a great event if you haven't attended it in the past. They're better in person, but the last two have been virtual. But again, would encourage you all to register to attend that if you can. If not the whole event, certainly components of it. It's always not just well attended, but they always have a great agenda. So with that, that's my report, Mayor and Council. And if any questions, I'd be more than happy to try and answer.
Questions for the city manager? Thank you. Hearing none, we'll move to council comments. Ms. Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had an opportunity Saturday to attend the community conversation on equity at Pierce College, put on through Clover Park School District. And it was very interesting. The entire program was wonderful. I think my favorite part was the comments from the students. So it was an event well worth attending. So thank you.
Mr. Brandstetter.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I also attended the self-sponsored community forum on Saturday, and I agree it was interesting, and it was good to see the firsthand some impact that the CELT team that the deputy mayor is a part of, and our police chief, that they're having meaningful conversations about how to better serve young people and get the community engaged with the success of young people to be able to go and do that. And then this morning I attended the official opening of the South Sound Public Safety Communications Center with with a ribbon cutting and a ceremony there that was well attended by many from the first responder community there to be able to go and do that. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too also attended the community forum on Saturday and found it just extremely fascinating. It was my first event, I guess it would be, with this organization. I know that they had paused and then they're getting back going again. So I found the conversation great. I loved the agenda, was fascinating, and just really just wonderful to hear with the video from the youth. And so it was a really good event, and I'm happy that I went.
Thanks. Mr. Volkey.
Okay, so I've only got one thing. I'm driving this weekend, and I see that thinking that Denny's was going to be a mess or torn down, and there's actually new construction going on. So then today on social media, somebody writes, looks like the old Denny's is going to be a Mexican barbecue place called Don Carbone. Small menu, but different than anything else. Then the words, this is the great line. Hopefully it'll be good and definitely be better than a burned out building. So we win a few here and there. So that's good. I'm glad somebody's rebuilding there. That's great news.
And I'll take a pass. Mr. Caulfield, anything further? Mr. Whalen.
No, not on my end, Mayor.
I didn't. I didn't
no,
recognize
you were done. No,
Mayor.
Mayor,
I'm
you
sorry.
were done. You were done, Mayor. No, you were done.
That's about 30 items here. No, I'm good.
Report
I had a nice-
from Tuscany.
Yeah, a nice couple of weeks. I have to say, when you talk about gathering spaces, the Europeans have it right, you know, in terms of creating opportunities for citizens and residents to kind of gather together. So one of these days, my hope to continue that march forward. We'll get there.
So
that's it.
I will just note that for a few vacation days, I was back in the city manager's old haunts. And whatever else they said about him back there, I have to say that he and his brothers made some good recommendations for restaurants. So. Of course, it's hard to go bad eating seafood around Boston. So if there's nothing further, we'll see you next Monday. We're adjourned.
Good night, everybody.
All right.